Hi, I'm Rebecca from engVid. Today, we're going to be looking at two very commonly confused words, and they are whose and whose. Now, as you can tell, they sound exactly the same. These words are called homonyms. And though they sound the same, they don't look the same and they don't mean the same thing, all right? And so it's really important to know the difference and to write the correct one when you need it, all right? Now, these are just, this is one example, a set, a pair that people get confused. There are many other homonyms like that in English. For example, your and your, there and there, and so on. There are many more. And actually, I have a course called Correct Your English Errors in 10 Minutes a Day. And in that course, we look at homonyms like this, these very common ones. And we help you to correct them so that you can start to write correctly. Homonyms matter more when you're writing, okay? Because, as I said, they sound the same. So when you say it and when you're speaking, it doesn't matter. Nobody can tell if you think you're using this word or this word. But when you're writing, it shows, all right? And you don't want to make these mistakes because very often these homonyms are very basic. So these are some of the things that I cover in the course. If you're interested, please check out the course. I'll leave the link for you in the lesson description. But for now, let's get started first with a little pre-quiz, okay? So let's look at these 4 sentences or questions, and you tell me whether you think we should be using this one or this one. And later, I will explain to you exactly what the difference is and how you can know. But let's see if you're using them correctly right now. So, number 1. Do we say, well, they're going to sound the same, okay? But whose cell phone is this? You want to ask, whose cell phone is this? Do we say the first one or the second one? How do we write that? Think about it. Okay, so the correct answer is this one, okay? Whose. Right now, I'm not going to explain why. I'm going to explain that right very soon on the next board, okay? Right now, let's just see if you're getting them right. Number 2. Do you know who's giving the lecture? Do you know who's giving the lecture? So, do we use the first one or the second one? So here, we should use this one. All right? Good. Number 3, who's in charge today? So, do we use the first one or the second one? We use this first one. All right? And number 4, the band whose music I like is on TV. So, which one do we use there? First or second? Here we use this one. All right? So, how did you do with that short quiz? Did you get them all right? Did you get them wrong? And if you got them right, do you know for sure that that was the right one? Or were you guessing a little bit? Maybe a little bit of both. So now let's make sure exactly that you understand by seeing what are the differences between these two homonyms. Now let's look at our 2 homonyms, whose and whose. So again, homonyms are words that, what? They sound the same, right? Whose, but the spelling is different and the meaning is different. So let's understand exactly what they are and how we use them. So the first one, whose, W-H-O''S, is a contraction. That means that it is a shortened form of something. Let's see what that is. So when we write whose like that, it could mean who is or who has. And we're going to understand that in our examples. So let's look at those. So we could say, who's there? Usually when someone knocks on the door, knock, 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 right? Then we might answer if we're inside, who's there? Okay, it means who is outside, right? So here, what does it stand for? Who is there? But we say, who's there? All right. Let's look at the next example. Who's driving? Okay. Again, what does it stand for here? Who is driving? All right. And the last example, who's been to the Philippines? That means who has visited the Philippines. So here it's who's been, right? We have a present perfect here. Who has been to the Philippines? All right. So as I said, this who apostrophe s can only be who is or who has. So if that makes sense in your sentence, that if you write it out, then you would need who is or who has, then use this form. All right. Now let's go to the other side. This one, whose, W-H-O-S-E, is also a homonym. It's also a pronoun like this one, and it can also be used in sentences and questions, just like here. However, it has a completely different meaning. This word is the possessive form of who or which. What does that mean? We use this word to say that something belongs to someone or refers to someone. All right? For example, whose phone is ringing? Right? So we're talking about the phone, and we say whose phone. In other words, who does that phone belong to? Right? Whose phone is ringing? And here, whose house are we going to? Again, whose what? House. Whose house? The house of whom are we going to? That's kind of what you're asking. And here, let's look at another example. These are the passengers whose flights were canceled. Okay, so again, we're using this form and not this, because we're not trying to say in any of these sentences who is or who has. So when you're not sure, break it up and say, am I trying to say who is or who has? If yes, if your answer is yes, then use this form. But if your answer is no, then you're going to use that form. All right? So that's the basic explanation. Let's do one last quick quiz to make sure that you've understood this. So before we start this quiz, let me just point out something. If you use a device that has autocorrect, very often it makes mistakes with homonyms. So don't count on or don't depend on your device to autocorrect and choose the right homonym, because unfortunately it does not always do that, okay? So it's much better if you know what is correct. So let's go ahead and check that now. Number 1. Did you find out whose books these are? Is it the first one or the second one? Think about it. So here it is whose, okay? Did you find out whose books these are? Okay? So you're asking kind of who do these books belong to, right? So we're saying whose books are these? We need this one. We're not trying to say, did you find out who is books? No. See, if you're not sure, try out. Is it who is? Is it who has? No? If that makes no sense, then it's this one, okay? Next, number 2. Who's leading the meeting? Number 1 or number 2? Which one do we use here? So here it is the first answer, because when we say it out, when we break up the contraction, it would be who is leading the meeting. All right? Good. Number 3. Who's had dinner? You want to order something, so you say, who's had dinner? You don't just say it, but you type it on your phone. All right? So what would you write there? This one or this one? So here it would be the first one, because here, what does it stand for? Who's? Who has had dinner? Remember I said whose, this one, can be who is or who has. So here it is who has had dinner. Good. Number 4. Whose laptop is this? Somebody forgot it. Whose laptop is this? So which one do we choose? The first one or the second one? It is this one, because we are really asking, who does this laptop belong to, right? And whenever we're talking about possession, we need to use this form. And in case you tried the other way and you tried to break this up and say, who is laptop? No, that doesn't make sense. So this is the one we want. We want to show possession. Who does the laptop belong to, or who does it refer to, right? So we want this form. And the last one, who's the manager? So what would that be? It would be this one, because we are asking what? Who is the manager? All right? So I hope this has given you a good idea of what exactly these two homonyms mean, how to use them, how to spell them, how to write them, and how to choose, most of all, which one is right in the right context, okay? And homonyms are very important because they're very basic words very often, like this, whose, your, their, and so on, okay? So as I mentioned, I have many homonyms as well as lots of other points of grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, expressions, and so on in the Correct Your English Errors course. So if you're interested, please have a look at that and check the link in the lesson description. Okay? So thanks very much for watching. All the very best with your English, and bye for now.